I've been hearing about this concept called abundance liberalism, and from what I understand, it's based off of a book that, what, I guess, like, for lack of a better term, one of the arch liberals, to quote unquote, wrote, called, well, his name is Ezra Klein, and that dude is a smug, annoying motherfucker. Like, if you want to, like, distill, like, the problems, broadly speaking, with, like, liberals, and you want to talk about, like, specific culprits and motherfuckers, Ezra fucking Klein. There's one of them right there. God, that dude is a smug, annoying piece of shit. I do not like that man. But what do you got here? It's been a thing that's been kind of going on for a while. Yeah, I don't know what it is with Kleins in particular, but they've all been kind of like weirdos. What is abundance liberalism, and why are people arguing about it? I've even seen like Kamala Harris peddle the sort of abundance liberalism stuff, and apparently our boy Sam Cedar has done a debate about the abundance agenda. But what we have here, I'm curious. A new book has sparked debate with its provocative claim that progressive public policy in the U.S. is broken. Now, what do we mean? Wait. What do we mean by that exactly? What do we mean? Broken in what sense? That, like, it's really difficult to pass through, like, a lot of public progressive policy because of the fact that capital interests are the things that are focused primarily first within like Congress, broadly speaking, within like states or something. Because if we're talking about Congress, yeah, like anything could be further from the truth. Like progressive policy in my Republican administration, right? But from what I understand, this is supposed to be like the both sides thing. Like, oh, we're talking about both the problems of the populist right and the left. This like stupid, dumb fucking like enlightened centrism bullshit. That is mostly being posited by this book. But what do we have here? Is progressive public policy in America broken? Do many left leaning laws actually make life more expensive for struggling people? I swear to God, if this is how like Ezra Klein is fucking framing this shit, it's gonna be so It's like, bro, how do we pay for it? How do we heckin' pay Reno for it, dudes, bros? We gotta pay for it. Duh. Like, how are we gonna do that? You tax the wealthy. That's what you do. But fucking dumbass neoliberals are never gonna fucking agree to any of that shit. Okay, never. So guess what? I already think that this is gonna be stupid, fucking idle conjecture and dog shit. Whoa, who would have thought that an arch liberal is gonna be stupid and annoying about stuff like this? But what do you have here? Is regulatory red tape hindering growth and innovation? This is like shit that was like taken from fucking Canada. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. From like fucking. You want to know who was the motherfucker who was parroting this fucking talking point? Fucking Pierre Poliev. Now he's not exactly incorrect in some ways. If we're talking about like interprovincial trade, it is kind of weird, but like it doesn't really matter all that much. But what else? Have Democratic run cities such as New York and San Francisco become giant billboards against liberal governments? Yes. Why? Because of just how weak and ineffective that liberal governance has been. It's not because of, I don't know, probably like what I guess is being argued here because of bureaucratic red tape. No, it's because of motherfuckers like Ezra Klein. Motherfuckers like Matt Iglesias. That's why they suck. Because they just are bad at advocating for good policy positions, which is why you should support Zoran Mamdani for New York City mayor. You want to see like how probably stupid this whole abundance liberalism myth is. You should support Zoran Mamdani, someone who's actually going to fight for the people of New York. But what else here? What do we got here? These arguments wouldn't sound out of place in a policy paper from a conservative think tank, yet their newest champions are two of America's best-known left-leaning journalists, the New York Times' Ezra Klein and Atlantic's Derek Thompson, and they believe the left is overdue for a reckoning of sorts. I wonder why The Guardian in particular is talking about, oh, policy paper from a conservative think tank. It's probably because these people aren't actually liberals. They're fucking conservatives. And they're full of shit. Completely fucking full of it. Well, unfortunately, Boy Meets Mini, the fucking Overton window is so ridiculously far to the fucking right in the United States of America that people probably do think that Ezra Klein is a fucking communist or whatever the fuck. So, Klein and Thompson make their case in a new book simply called, with no subtitle, Abundance. The authors put forward a positive pitch for abundance liberalism, a vision of the U.S. where policymakers spend less time fighting over how to apportion scarce resources and make more time making sure there's no scarcity to start with. What the fuck does this even mean? The argument is the fact that the US is not producing enough? This is the... Okay. This is fucking stupid, bro. What the fuck are you talking about? No, that's not the fucking problem, dude. What the fuck are you saying? Okay, bro. Alright. I guess let's engage with this. What is, broadly speaking, the problem with what Ezra Klein is sort of saying here? No. The problem is not the fact that, like, there is no bipartisan fucking consensus within Congress. That is fucking stupid. Broadly speaking, when bipartisan consensus is made in Congress, it's to pass mostly illiberal fucking policies. Not anything that benefits, broadly speaking, the people. This is fucking stupid. Like, simply fucking put. So, that's pretty fucking cool. And like The Guardian seems to get here, which is the main thesis of the fucking goddamn argument, it ignores the effect of corporate power and downplays Republicans' roles in the crises that the U.S. faces or overstates the effectiveness of its policy prescriptions. They're doing the same fucking stupid bullshit that fucking liberals do every single fucking time, and that is having complete utter deference in the solidness and unwaveringness of U.S. institutions, and that Trump is just a fucking aberrance. No, the system that currently exists within Congress, within the U.S., is fundamentally fucking broken. But what do we have here? Abundance has, because if we're like assuming what abundance means here, we can broadly assume it's because they think there's like a lack of resources within the United States of America for some fucking reason, when like anything else could be probably further from the fucking truth. This is fucking silly if this is what they think. Abundance has received a mostly positive reception so far, but has also sparked debate. Sure, man. Yeah, richest country on earth, but with the most threadbare of social fucking safety nets. Somehow, like, fucking poorer European countries are able to do, like, full fucking healthcare for every fucking citizen, and it's free and open for fucking everyone, but the US can't for some reason. And it's not because of no bipartisan consensus. If there is a bipartisan consensus, and that is to fuck people over, that's what the bipartisan consensus is. Doesn't Romania have universal healthcare? We have some kind of universal healthcare. It's a little weird, but yeah, kind of. Like, when I got sick in Romania once with, like, some food poisoning shit, my parents didn't have to pay anything. So, yeah. Like, even fucking Romania can fucking do this shit. So, but the US can't? Okay, bro. So what? With critics arguing that the book ignores the effect of corporate power. Where's that fucking Yale study? Yale study on oligarchy. Or is it a Princeton study? US is an oligarchy, not a democracy. It was Princeton. I want the Princeton study. I know it was either Yale or Princeton. Here's the fucking study. Who gets what they want? Let's look up policy outcomes. Raw consistency between policy preference. Groups A and B each consistent with policy 10 times out of 16, but for Group A, policies are they're as likely as to opt if they're favored or opposed. I'm looking for public preferences and policies. The correlation between that and here we go. Policy preference and policy preference, policy income, policy outcomes by income percentile. What do you have here? So highest agreement questions or high agreement questions. Number of sample size 454. I'm assuming these are the income percentiles. What, the top 10th percentile going lower and lower. So high agreement question. So taxes, more rich conservative, plus 4%. Support / evenly split. Welfare reform, social reform. I would guess this is broadly speaking sort of talking about who supports particular policies and stuff like that. So poor 10th percentile. Divergent policy. Where's the fucking conclusion? Oh, here we go. Sadly, the results presented above suggest they may be right. Whether or not elected officials and other decision makers care about middle-class Americans' influence over actual policy outcomes appears to be reserved almost exclusively for those at the top of the income distribution. What's the table that this is being associated with? Where is it? This is going through a bunch of different policies. Talking about who I assume benefited mostly. The income and preference policy link. Talking about the linkage between who benefits the most. Is there a table here? No, this is just the overall report. No, it's just the whole report. But that's crazy. That the conclusion says this in particular. Whoa. Yeah, truly they're like Hamas. It's all Hamas, actually. Princeton, Hamas. Obviously. Downplays Republicans' role in the crises that the U.S. faces or overstates the effectiveness of its policy prescriptions. What, did they fucking slow the fuck out over the Inflation Reduction Act, basically? That the thing that got like decrepit for no reason. Certainly had some good provisions in it. It was never going to go far enough. And also, like, I guess abundance has no mention at all about any fucking Republican tax cuts, because in reality, neoliberals actually agree with those fucking tax cuts. But that's cool. Whatever. A writer in the left-leaning magazine American Prospect accused the abundance agenda of being neoliberalism repackaged for a post-neoliberal world. Couldn't agree anymore with that. The book opens the striking image of a U.S. in the year of 2050 that is close to utopia. Here's how you know these motherfuckers are fucking delusional. What, they think... What, did they literally think this? The solar punk meme? No, literally, does Ezra Klein think this? Utopia meme. Yeah, 20, like, fucking 25, you know, here, edit with this template, alright? Literally, okay. Society, if the, abundance... agenda is real, right? This is unironically what fucking Ezra Klein believes. So fucking dumb, bro. Americans' electrical needs are powered by sustainable energy, even though Trump is pretty much destroying any chance of that at all. So that's cool. Or basically, he's doing everything possible to fucking have any opportunity of fucking destroying that shit. So that's cool. That's really great and fucking wholesome, epic Reno. Super soy, very, very wholesome, big chungus, very good, folks. What can I tell you? We love Ezra Klein. Uh, where is it? Electrical needs powered by sustainable energy. So clean it could barely leave a carbon trace, and so cheap you can scarcely find it on your monthly bill. AI breakthroughs. Yeah, dude, because there's gonna be strong enough sustainable energy to fucking be able to power up all the fucking server banks needed for AI farms. Labor rights and economic reforms mean that most people can do their jobs in a shorter work week. Vertical farms provide cheap and fresh vegetables. Desalinated water from the ocean is used as drinking water, and lab-grown meat has replaced animal slaughter. Under fucking neoliberalism, where's the capitalists gonna make profit though, Ezra Klein? That's the real question. Yeah, this is like complete fucking nonsense. Why would they fucking ever want any of this stuff? It's fucking cheaper to slaughter animals. Is technology for lab grown meat going to be enough in like 20 years? I doubt it. Also, like, you're assuming that Republicans aren't going to do everything possible to get in the way of all this shit, because this is like literally all the stuff that they fucking despise. Lab grown meat, desalinated fucking water. You think fucking Republicans like cheap and fresh vegetables? Fuck no. And reflexively speaking, they're just going to be against this. Period. Silly. This near future America, less the gritty neon smog of Blade Runner than a high-tech Copenhagen, is entirely achievable, the authors argue. Yeah, not under neoliberalism, because neoliberalism and the goals of neoliberalism and conservatism are the exact fucking same. This is fucking silly. But what? It just requires political vision and a willingness to reconsider certain assumptions. Yeah, and you're saying that the fucking Democratic Party has that fucking vision? This is incredibly fucking naive, dude. Despite being the richest country in the world, the US has a problem of scarcity. What? Scarcity? No, you fucking don't. What are you mean? It's not scarcity. It's about who owns the fucking most capital. Like, you're in a second gilded age, Ezra. But he's actually okay with that, because how much does he get paid by New York Times? He's a millionaire, right? What's Ezra Klein's net worth? Let's take a look. Not publicly available. He is a well-known media personality. Yeah, he used to be a co-founder of Fox. How much does he have? How rich is this motherfucker? Yeah, like you're saying, Boy Meets Mini. Yeah, 19 families own 50% of the private wealth of America. 19 families own most of the wealth. Over, like, about half of the wealth. But yeah, man, if we just heckin' produce a Reno, more stuff a Reno, then we'll totally have our super heckin' cool, like, liberal solar punk utopia, guys. Totally, man. Sure. The fuck out of here with this bullshit, Ezra. Jesus Christ. Where particularly in the Democratic-run metropolitan area, where the cost of houses and other basic needs have spiraled out of control. Why has the cost of housing spiraled out of control, Ezra? Could it be because of real estaters that bankroll the fucking goddamn campaigns of local leaders consistently? Ezra? Oh no, it's because of like no heckin' it's obviously because of a scarcity of resources, guys. That's actually the reason why. Thank you, Ezra. Very, very cool. And what? The cost of basic needs? You want to know what's causing a spiral in the fucking cost of basic needs? Corporate fucking price gouging and the inflation that occurred because of it. Not because of the fact that there's been a scarcity of fucking resources. It's nonsense, dude. This is exacerbated by the traditional progressive solution of giving people money or vouchers to help them pay for finite resources such as housing, health care, and food. Let's see. From what I recall correctly, I believe, for example, that in terms of food production, there is a lot of food. The U.S. grows a ton of food. They tend to overproduce food. But that's cool. Self-sufficient in food production. Where are like the videos of people like videos of grocery stores throwing out food? A report on food waste. Well, that was about 8 years ago. What is this? Food waste in grocery stores. I just saw a video on YouTube published a couple years ago of these guys finding loads of perfectly good food thrown out behind a grocery store. Is this still going on today? It's about 2 years ago. Totally happens in America. I follow the dumpster diver thread on Reddit, and a lot of food is recovered. Some people feed their entire family from dumpster finds. This is 2 years ago. Oh, but there's not enough food in America. Sure, thank you, Ezra. What else? Housing. Housing isn't fucking finite. The problem is fucking zoning in America. And a lot of the very fucking nitpicky fucking goddamn regulations that exist within housing for America. That is why housing is as expensive as it is, because a lot of real estate agencies lobby local and municipal governments to be like, hey, can you make sure that you just do everything possible to not raise, to make sure that we can make as much profit as possible for housing? The problem is the profit motive for things that have inelastic demand, Ezra. And healthcare. Do we really need to go into healthcare? Yeah, the privatized healthcare system is really, really good. Stupid. Which increases demand and merely makes those things even more expensive. This is the most fucking stupid fucking shit I have ever heard of in my fucking life. No, the problem with the US healthcare system is not increased demand. It's a fucking mafia middleman that wants to get their fucking cut. That's the fucking problem. It's the privatized fucking system that exists within the United States of America. Not because of the abundance of healthcare within America. Get your fucking head out of your ass, dude. Silly. The problem is that if you subsidize the cost of something that there isn't enough of, you'll raise prices or force rationing, Klein has said. What? The USSR was able to subsidize significant amounts of housing for a lot of the rural poor and inner city poor people within the United Socialist States of Russia, within the USSR. They had no problem with doing this. And guess what? They made sure to build more than enough housing. China also has the same thing. In fact, they have an abundance of housing. They actually have a real estate problem because they have a lot of fucking housing and not enough people who can go into them because of how much of speculative real estate management is screwing with that fucking particular housing market. It's not about abundance. Because, oh, you can't have too much fucking housing. Otherwise, you're gonna cause prices to skyrocket if you have too much supply. We're applying, like, economics 101 to your shit in probably the dumbest way possible. So that's cool. But yeah, forced fucking rationing. Forced rationing only happened in fucking communist states like Romania because Ceausescu's a fucking idiot who doesn't know how to who doesn't know how to do policy because he's a fucking moron. He and Thompson have described themselves as supply side progressives. Yet you call yourselves progressives, yet you downplay all of the actions of the Republican Party. You don't talk about the capital owners, and you could do like a fucking NIMBY-esque defense of real estate agencies who fucking pump money into local campaigns, making it harder to afford housing. And don't fucking talk about the overproduction of food and grocery stores throwing that shit constantly out. Get the fuck out of here. What the U.S. badly needs to do is to build, they argue, build more houses, public transportations, power plants, and other infrastructure. But that isn't happening. Okay, I agree. Yes. But what's the problem? A lot of fucking bureaucratic bullshit because guess who gets in the way of that? Oh, the Republican Party tends to get in the way of that. Crazy. Who would have thought? One obstacle is NIMBYism, the tendency of people to support public works and development in the abstract, but fight them when they affect their own neighborhoods. Yeah, you want to know the problem with that? It's because of how reliant America is on generational wealth being tied in their homes as an asset. Because everything is commodified in America. This was quite literally spoken about in one of the recent videos that we watched from the Financial Diet, talking about the problems with generational wealth, which is why one of the things that makes crazy housing as expensive as it is. Silly. Another is everything bagel log rolling that complicates what should be narrowly focused legislation by layering it with other social and political objectives. Ah, class reductionism. Very cool. Such as, I thought these guys were progressive. That's a little weird. Such as diverse hiring requirements or climate crisis goals. Yet these guys want to have a fucking goddamn solar punk utopia. Okay, dude. In order to appease interest groups or political constituencies. They're not wrong about this, but the problem is that this is a por qué no los dos. This is the exact same shit that fucking Republicans argue about. Like, conservatives have these arguments. This is so fucking funny. If only I told Ezra these exact policies are why India is the way that it is. Yep. In an example Thompson recently discussed on a podcast, well, there's your problem. Podcasts. Then President Biden signed legislation in 2021 providing $42 billion to expand a broadband internet in rural America, which is good. As of this December, according to Politico, the program had yet to connect a single household. Critics told Politico that this was partially because of a suite of federal conditions. Oh, guess who probably put those conditions in place? Stupid, dumb fucking morons, probably like Kirsten Sinema and Republicans, as well as Joe fucking Manchin, because they hate you. Simply put, that requires states accepting the money to make sure providers plan for climate change, reach out to unionized labor forces, and hire locally, as well as guarantee affordable broadband plans for people with low incomes. Wait. That's so fucking funny that they are quite literally against... Oh my fucking lord. I don't want the state of Virginia taking, say, federal money to build broadband internet and then charging poor rural folks like $200 a month to go online. It wouldn't cost that much. The federal government doesn't need the profit motive for this shit. What the fuck are you talking about? They can just take it out of fucking taxes. They can leverage this program through, like, different tax brackets. Have the states pay like more in terms of like taxes for it. You know, the states that tend to be more tax positive don't have need as much money as like in comparison to rural states. Silly. But by holding those values so closely, we accidentally built just about nothing. A confusion of process versus outcomes meant that very little was actually done on behalf of the Americans for whom we wanted to raise their living standards. Or, you know, quite literally, they say like we don't want the government to have like a fucking goddamn subsidization program, but we also don't want the government to charge rural people $200 a month for fucking internet broadband. Which is it then? Stupid. Another example is California, which in 1982 began studying the idea of implementing a high-speed rail system across the state. Thanks, Elon. Since 1982. The idea was and is extremely popular with voters. I feel like I'm about to get real fucking triggered about this one. Same with you, Boy Meets Mini. What does Elon Musk believe? That's very funny to see that right beside the fucking high-speed rail system section. The idea was and is extremely popular with voters, and billions of dollars were budgeted for the project. 4 decades later, almost none of it has been built. Yeah, who got in the way of that? Elon. Crazy. A votocracy of regulatory, legal, environmental, and political considerations have caused endless delays and continually narrowed the project's ambition. The article itself is fine, Boy Meets Smitty. It's what fucking these two morons fucking believe in is a complete fucking meme. Yeah, who was doing the fucking vetoing, Ezra? Oh, it was the governors of California. At the behest of Elon Musk. Crazy. In the time California has spent failing to complete its 500-mile high-speed rail system, Thompson and Klein write, China has built more than 23,000 miles of high-speed rail. This is true. Why? Who has been making California fucking fail to complete this? Oh, it's the fucking Hyperloop. Dumb fuckery. Crazy. The solution to these problems, Abundance argues, is a combination of techno-optimism, ambitious and clearly defined policy goals, and political leadership that is willing at times to say no to progressive pressure groups. The fuck is the... Which progressive pressure groups? You want to know? Okay, if we're talking about DEI fucking hires in terms of progressive pressure groups, you want to know who's doing that shit? It's motherfuckers like yourselves. It's neo-fucking liberals and other fucking liberals that are doing that shit. Incredulously. Silly. Klein and Thompson favorably cite what happened when a bridge collapsed in Pennsylvania in 2023, crippling an essential highway. To fix it would typically take months of planning, consultation, and reviews. Governor Josh Shapiro instead declared a state of emergency that allowed the reconstruction of the build with union labor, but free from many normal processes. The highway reopened in 12 days instead of the 12 to 24 months that it might have taken. Yeah, you want to know why that it was so fucking fast? Because there's economic incentives of the bourgeoisie that wanted that highway to be reopened as fast as fucking possible. Jesus Christ, dude. That's a good copy pasta. Thank you, Ezra Klein. Fucking morons. Abundance makes it clear that it is a book written for the left and isn't really interested in elaborating in the ways that Republicans and conservatives have contributed to these problems, though Klein and Thompson acknowledge that they have. Yet, within the left, the book has proven controversial. Whoa, they care more about fucking left bashing because the bigger problem is the fucking Republicans and conservatives, not the fucking left. And what do they mean by the left? Random progressive pressure groups? Like, is Justice Democrats getting in the way of, like, building these bridges, talking about, like, diversity quotas or DSA? Get the fuck out of here. No, it's either, like, dumbass fucking neoliberals who are wielding woke issues as incredulously as possible to get in the way of stuff like this, or it's fucking conservative fucking think tanks. Because, again, here's the fucking problem with neoliberals like Ezra Klein and fucking Thompson here, okay? They think that neoliberalism is liberal. This is a concept I've been wanting to talk about, but neoliberalism is not liberalism. If we are talking about liberalism, broadly speaking, in terms of what the Enlightenment was supposed to bring, you know what would have happened? There would have been fucking open borders. Enlightenment thinkers advocated for open borders. For men only, of course. But for open borders, broadly speaking, in general. You can make the same arguments, obviously, because again, these are like what? During the Renaissance, a lot of people were fucking misogynistic, okay? Whatever. But quite literally, your fucking, your Adam Smiths of the world, your fucking Immanuel Kants, they would have been pro-open borders. You motherfuckers would have been against that. So it is, you people are completely full of shit. No, the things that make the decisions around in Congress, broadly speaking, are, guess who? Capital owners. Crazy. Who would have thought that that would be the fucking case? But, you know, none of these idiots fucking understand that shit. Fantastic. Excellent. It would be a huge mistake, Matt Bruning, a policy analyst, wrote in Jacobin, to sideline whatever focus there is on welfare state expansion and economic egalitarianism in favor of a focus on administrative burdens in construction. He continued, indeed, we have now seen what it looks like when government supports and subsidizes technological innovation and implementation without considering itself within the egalitarianism of the system. His name is Elon Musk. In its desire to promote electrical vehicles and rocketry innovations, the U.S. government made him the richest man in the world. Crazy, isn't it? And then he used his riches to take over a major political communications platform, and then the government. Thank you, Matt Bruning, for saying the exact same shit that I've been saying, and seemingly not what these fucking morons can fucking ever think of in their lives. Oh, dude, no, it's definitely because of progressive political groups and not because of the bourgeoisie, dude. Sure, man. Stupid. While agreeing with some of Abundance's aims, the journalists Paul Glasris and Nate Weisberg, writing in the Washington Monthly, argued that the book's perceptions won't necessarily bring the kind of sweeping changes that Thompson and Klein believe. For example, according to the examples... Okay, that's a bit of a wacky way to fucking phrase that, but sure, whatever. According to the examples they cite, areas of the U.S. That have reformed zoning laws to make it easier to build apartment buildings and multifamily homes have only seen modest reductions in the cost of housing. Crazy. It's almost as if there is a fucking problem with zoning fucking laws within America. And that's why fucking housing sucks in America. It's a problem with the housing. Even though, again, I don't agree with what these two journalists are saying. I do think that apartment buildings and probably multifamily, or it's mixed-use zoning, right? Mixed-use zoning is what's going to fucking take care of this stuff. But Ezra Klein and Thompson, I don't think have ever argued in favor of mixed-use zoning. Quite literally, we have a model for this in terms of, with Austria, right? I don't remember the name, but like, Austrian social housing is very, very fucking popular. Because they basically put everything. Not only is there the actual apartment buildings themselves, but also like offices for work. Doctors' offices are in there. There's other amenities like a gym, tennis courts, different like sports plays areas, shit like this. Ezra Klein and Thompson are not in favor of any of that stuff, okay? Stupid. Thompson and Klein have argued that the abundance agenda is bigger than any individual policy proposal, and more about the Democratic Party and other left leaning institutions rethinking their own ambitions and how they conceive of success and failure. Liberals should be able to say, vote for us and we will govern the country the way we govern California. That's not gonna fucking work, dude. Because everyone's immediately gonna be like, California, we hate California. That's not gonna, okay, I'm gonna optics frog here. We're optics frogging right now, okay? We're being optics frogs. This is gonna be the easiest fucking propaganda win for every fucking dumb fuck conservative think tank on the planet. They'll just constantly run ads, talk about look at the goddamn Democrats. They want to run everything like it's California. California, dude. No one wants California. It's the easiest fucking dunk for them. Instead, conservatives are able to say, vote for them, and they will govern the country the way they govern California. What has gone wrong? This is the fucking stupidest quote I've ever seen in my fucking life. Jesus Christ. I knew this shit was probably bad. I didn't think it would be this fucking bad. So at least now I know. So the abundance agenda is basically how can we speak out of both sides of our fucking mouth and basically do everything possible to make it such that our policy goals and objectives are going to be as ineffective as fucking possible. Great, fantastic, excellent. Because the problem is they're not tackling the root cause and root basis of these fucking issues, and that is the profit motive. That is why the current problems exist within, well, the sort of neoliberal malaise that we fucking find ourselves under. No, it's not because of, whatever idiotic fucking nonsense that these fucking morons are talking about. No, the main problem is the fact that, hey, whoa, guess what? Crazy. It's because of capital, stupid. That's why. But, I'm looking forward to listening to this, dumbass fucking debate between this supposed fucking intellectual fucking titan, Ezra Klein and Sam Cedar. What do we have here? We're starting right at the debate because, Sam do be loving to do his preamble.
Exploring the question of why in the places Democrats govern, or in the times when Democrats govern, are liberals, are Democrats, are in some cases people on the left, unable to produce more of the things we need? Why is there so little housing in California and New York? Sam, where are you? Just so I have you
in New York.
You're in New York. So why in places like New York and California and Illinois, where you have a lot of Democratic control, have become very unaffordable? Why is it very hard to site enough clean energy, even though that's...
Because of, like I talked about before, it's not because of the lack of abundance or the lack of, production within, fucking current neoliberal systems. No, that's not the fucking problem. The problem is, whoa, crazy, because of real estate agents and speculative housing markets.
Become a major project for the Democratic Party. Why is so much that we do so goddamn slow? Medicare released its Medicare cards a year after it was passed into law. Getting prescription drug prices negotiated on 10 drugs took 3 years and will only go into effect this year, just in time for Donald Trump to take advantage of it and brag that it was him who did it. So this question of the sclerosis of liberal government, how do we actually make it deliver the things it is promising to deliver, is the core inquiry of the book.
And the culprits run across, I guess, four sort of main silos, as far as I can tell. We have the regulation and bureaucratic red tape, and this is a problem both in terms of
Yeah, this is a lot of technocrat fucking stupid dumb fuckery and bullshit so far. It's not because of overregulation. That's not the main fucking problem. The main problem is capital.
Building infrastructure, and to some extent within the context of housing. There are that housing is also addressed by local, I guess, incumbent groups that have power there. The infrastructure, again, some of that bureaucratic process is a function, and we'll get into this, is a function of environmental regulations that end up getting abused in some fashion. And then in the context of of science and innovation, it is a sort of a risk-averse funding. But let me, before we go into some of the specifics, from your perspective, because I've been reading a lot of there's a lot of reviews of the book.
Have you read the book?
I have. Well, I've listened to the book.
That's good.
And I like your read better than Derek's. Okay, but I listened to the book. That's a different critique. But yes, I have read the book, and I've also read. There's a tremendous amount of reviews about the book.
What is your critique of the book? I want to answer your critique of the book.
Well, I will get to that. Okay. I will get to that. But from your perspective, is this a policy or a political book?
Oh, I don't think you can separate those two.
Okay,
you know my career. I'm a policy person way back, but I think something that has always been central to the way I understand that is policy, politics, and process. And I think this is very much a book about process and proceduralism are all intertwined. The idea that you can peel them apart, that you can say, oh, this bucket is policy, this bucket is politics, is not at all how I look at that question.
Yeah, and I guess we'll start with the policy side first. But broadly, my critique is there seems to be an absence of I think the culprits that you have chosen in some instances are correct, but broadly speaking, there's an absence of analysis of power dynamics. I think that and the interplay of money and politics, or I should say power, in our society.
So yeah, okay. Sam Cedar immediately going after the main crux of the issue, the fact that Ezra Klein and Thompson, or I'm just going to specifically only talk about Ezra Klein, has no mention about money and politics. We took a look at the fucking Princeton study, the conclusion that it reaches. Whoa. Policy outcomes appear to be reserved almost exclusively for those at the top of the income distribution. Crazy. Who would have thought that that would be the case? Whoa. Whoa. Crazy, isn't it, guys?
I think is problematic. I mean, I think, like, look, there have been, questions about specific policies and assumptions. I've read critiques about your assessments of why China is able to do certain things and whatnot. But and I also think the power questions really filter through a lot of what you perceive to be problematic. And then I think, broadly, I think it's also difficult to understand, like, how this is going to function as a political question. But we will get to all of that.
We'll do the second in a minute.
But let's do the
talk
policy
about power. Let me talk about power. I have been interested to see this critique develop. And I just had Zephyr teach out on my show. There's an episode with her and Shaka Chakrabarti called Abundance on the Left that I think people would be interested to hear sort of do the power debate at some length. I think this has been very revealing to me about what my friends on the left, and I think of myself usually on the left, a liberal, not a leftist, I guess, mean when they say power. I think this is a book entirely about power. But it is a book that treats power highly situationally. So there is a structure of power that...
It's a book about power, but it treats it very, very situationally. Yeah. Has no mentions at all of the main culprits who wield and utilize their power, their influence, and their wealth in order to affect policy outcomes. No mentions of that whatsoever. But yeah, it's a book about power, guys. Sure, man.
Arranged itself around, say, housing development in San Francisco. That is a different structure of power than arranged itself around the question of can you build interstate transmission lines, which is a different structure of power than arranged itself around the question of can you site rural broadband and build that in the way that you want to, which is a different structure of power than you see in a bunch of the other cases in the book. And one thing we are attempting to do over and over and over...
Why? This is all the same shit. What are you fucking talking about? Like, why are we making these, like, strange fucking distinctions, right? It's fairly obvious what the fucking problem is. The current state apparatuses that exist within the U.S. do not work in the favor of the people. They work in the favor of private interests and capital. That's the main problem with this. It's not because, like, oh yeah, it's because of, like, neurotic and bureaucratic processes. I do agree with Ezra that certainly has a role to play. I don't disagree with that. The problem is that he's trying to make it out as if that's, like, the main problem. No, that's not the main issue at play here.
Over again, is get extremely granular about what is happening. So one thing that bothers me about the power analysis that I hear on the left, let's take housing, because I also think it's very important to ground things in, like, a specific case. Texas builds more housing than California. It builds more housing than New York. When people move to Austin and Houston and Dallas, they build homes. When people move to San Jose and San Francisco and Los Angeles, they don't. Is your view, do you find it a credible view to say that the issue is Texas has solved the corporate power problem, but California is permeable to corporate power and dominated by oligarchy in a way that Texas, or for that matter, Florida, is not?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it's not necessarily corporate power. I think what we're talking about is money. I think we're just talking about money.
So
and
Texas has solved the money and politics problem, but California does not.
Well, I can tell you that, like, if you want to compare, let's say, San Francisco to Houston, right, you just have a lot more space in Houston. You have a lot more money in San Francisco. And so the power that rests with the money is more concentrated.
So, yeah, like I said, and so far, the problem that I'm having here immediately is, you know what's not being mentioned? Zoning laws. Sam Cedar isn't incorrect in saying that this is a money and politics issue. Certainly that has a part to play. The problem is how fucking zoning laws work within a lot of Democratic-run cities. Because they have to fucking accommodate for all those dumb fuck, stupid fucking NIMBYs. That's the one of the main fucking problems.
Literally, right? And has the ability in those instances to stop this housing project or that housing project. Like, look at Austin, for instance. You bring up Austin. In the course of Austin, and this was, I read this in the review, because obviously I'm not studying Austin or San Francisco for that matter. But Joe Wiesenthal wrote, that his observation about Austin was that it was cheap, and then it got very expensive. Then there was, and it was a function of costs went up, rents went up. It became expensive there.
Rents have gone down in Austin because they built so much.
They built so much.
I want to follow what you said the first time.
But
San Francisco has
there was
concentrated
no
money in a way that...
change. There was no change.
I mean, you can only build so much, right? So, eventually, even in, like, Austin, like, because I don't think, like, suburban sprawl, because Ezra Klein, I don't think, like, he's already talked about how he's not in favor of building, like, multifamily homes, right? From the sort of, like, little blurb that we read about, right? For example, according to examples, they cite areas of the U.S. that have reformed zoning laws to make it easier to build apartment buildings and multifamily homes have only seen a modest reduction in the cost of housing. So broadly speaking, we know what, like, really fixes this problem, right? Mixed-use fucking zoning. The problem is a lot of like NIMBYism that exists, like all the like HOAs and people like expected to have to maintain certain like costs of fucking housing. That's the biggest fucking problem that exists. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, with the fact that housing is a commodity first, it is meant to make money instead of, provide housing for people. That's the biggest fucking problem that exists, broadly speaking, within housing in America. It's not about providing like suitable outcomes for people in homes and stuff like that. It's all about making money first and foremost, because it's all fucking privatized to shit. That's the issue.
Change in the building codes, for instance. Like the argument
The
that
building code responded in Austin. So you can just go look. I don't know if you guys are able to pull up data on the show and show it, but just go pull it up if we can. You can search Fred housing starts in Austin and San Francisco. You can just do this in general. You can look at this analysis across blue and red cities.
But
Let me just. Let me just. I want to go through this example, but we can go through a bunch of them. Houston doesn't have a zoning code. That's why it's easier to build there. And I was talking to a developer there, and he said, look, the thing everybody knows about Houston, if you're a developer, is it's a bad place to be a homeowner. It's a good place to be a developer. And this is what I mean when I say the whole book in a way is about power. That in these procedural questions, in this question of how do you get housing approved, what we've created in many blue cities is a lot of veto points. And that veto point can be used by corporate power. It can be used by moneyed interests. It can be used by local homeowners who are not power in the way we normally think of them, but sure as hell are power when you think about whether or not to build housing. It can be used by all sorts of players. And so I think that one of the places where I quite diverge from some of my other friends on this is that I think when you create this level of proceduralism, this level of veto points, they get captured by interest over time. And that is a place where power can pool. Now, I think the place where it's probably hard, just to finish the thought.
No, then it would just get captured elsewhere. Like, what does he mean by this, right? Capital will just instead use their fucking money, influence, and power in order to capture a different particular part. That's the fucking problem, right? The problem is the money, is the special interests that are in control. That is what it is. It's about maintenance of hierarchy and control. But liberals will never ever make those fucking fundamental critiques, ever.
I think the place where I probably part is that I think that the left
Rather
is very
neoliberals,
attentive to
to
power
be
when it is coming
honest.
from certain recognized villains, and much less attentive to power when it is coming from people who might in other contexts look like allies or just be local homeowners, but that can also be real power wielded in a problematic way.
Well, but you listed off three entities that have power: corporate power, moneyed interests, and homeowners. And I would suggest to you that in all three of those that you just listed, that money is ultimately the controlling factor. So for instance, I can tell you, like, I don't know San Francisco, I don't know Austin, I know Worcester, Mass. And I can tell you that during urban renewal, we had, there was an entire neighborhood that was completely, I don't know if you've ever been to Worcester, gone through 290. There was an entire neighborhood called Laurel Clayton, I think it was, that ended up dumping people into a housing project, Plumley Village. And it was all run by the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. It was completely streamlined. None of the other, what we would call today groups. There was no equity involved in this, equitable justice or anything like this. And the neighborhood was completely destroyed because the input only essentially came from this big insurance company and the Worcester Redevelopment Authority, which was essentially owned by the same type of people. And I only know about this because a buddy of mine was homeless in high school because of how much destruction generationally it had created as a result of that. And so when you list off those three elements of power, in my mind, those are all moneyed interests. Those local homeowners, I'm sure there are stories of low-income people who own homes in an area that hasn't been redeveloped, is able to stop building. But I would imagine those are very far and few between.
And I think we should be in agreement, right? If this is the case you're making, then I think we should be in agreement because there's no doubt.
Well, I'm saying it's moneyed interest.
It's sometimes money interest for sure, right?
Well, what is it?
Let me finish the thought, and then you can give me your rebuttal. When you create these highly legalistic systems, the people with the money to hire lawyers and lobbyists are going to be more capable within them. And so the structure of a society that begins to vary so much in bureaucracy, where you have to know when to show up at the planning meeting, and you have to know who the city council members are. Like, it begins to structurally favor those who can navigate that society. So when we talk about things like upzoning, where we want to make it possible to build more houses in an area, like everybody knows it is almost impossible to upzone a rich area, and that is because they're able to bend this process to their will. Now, you can take a place like
All right, let me address that. I mean,
Okay, the problem with this is he's not exactly wrong. However, the problem is, like, if we're talking about people that are able to bend this to their will with their money, because that is true. What Sam Cedar is saying, like, yeah, they're able to bend this to their will with money, quite literally. That is how that works, right? That is why, like I mentioned before, if we're talking about, like, mechanisms for real estate agents or like real estate companies in order to make as much money as possible, Ezra Klein doesn't really talk about that. He says that they're a factor when in reality they're the main fucking problem. Broadly speaking, you can talk to like any like local representative. Generally speaking, the main problem is the fact that there is not like bureaucratic red tape, but a lot of housing, since it's commodified, is generally used as speculative real estate assets. That's the biggest problem.
I get that point there, and I think that is what worries. I don't know about other people, but that's the type of thing that worries me, because the argument you just made is almost identical to the one that I would have every week with Tim Carney, who I know, back in the day. which is an idea that the problem with wealthy influence, and if you and I agree, then it is money. The problem with
Well,
it
we
is
don't agree
that
that it's all money.
okay,
Because money is one mechanism of influence.
but it is. I think it is the biggest one. Would you agree with that?
It depends on the issue. So look,
No,
there
I'm saying
are a bunch
across
of these issues.
Okay,
but
let me finish my
point
point about Tim Carney. He would say that you need to have less government. That way, it cannot be as corrupted or manipulated by moneyed interest. Now, I don't know if you think that money is the problem 51% of the time or 30% of the time.
I don't think categorically asking that question is, but here, let me say where I disagree with Tim Carney, because maybe he'll clarify where maybe you and I don't agree. Tim wants a less capable state. I want a more capable state. Tim wants a state that does fewer things. I want a state capable of doing more things, including things it has already promised to do. So when I look at California high-speed rail, I work backward.
Yeah, but wants to also like have a state that is also like seemingly like strangely class reductionist for like some reason. You know, nice meme, dude.
And I say, what the fuck happened? That the state of California could not build high-speed rail, which they can do in Japan, they can do in China, they can do in Europe. Tim looks at it and
Yeah, Elon Musk. It's Elon Musk. Quite literally, it's Elon Musk. If he doesn't mention Elon Musk, then you can pretty much disregard everything, the rest of the fucking point that he's like gonna waffle on about here, and just be like, yeah, he's just a complete fucking charlatan. He's full of shit.
and says they shouldn't be trying to build high-speed rail. And so the disagreement I have with Doge, with a lot of my friends on the right, is they want to reduce state capacity. I come at this as a liberal who wants the state to accomplish very difficult things: decarbonizing the economy, building enough affordable housing, including, by the way, public housing, building mass public infrastructure, things like high-speed rail or the Big Dig or the Second Avenue subway here in New York City. And what I see is a state failing to accomplish its goals.
Right.
Now they would say, don't fucking try. I would say, fix the state. And one issue with the state is that it has become so highly regulated, not in terms. I find that when I use the term deregulation, like people's brains turn off because they think of deregulation as something that the state does for the market. But no player is more highly regulated than the state itself, often by Republicans, often because of.
Ezra, who are the main people that do all the deregulations? This is actually fucking insane, dude. Jesus Christ. Like, fucking Mark Fisher is currently rolling in his fucking grave, dude. This is like all fucking capitalist fucking realism bullshit, like, played out. It's so fucking funny, dude.
Power in the way that you would define it. But I think a lot of liberals, a lot of leftists have, one, and this is my critique going backwards, ceased to see this. But two, they don't take state failure seriously. And when something like California high-speed rail happens or rural broadband, they sort of move on instead of saying, why are we not delivering? We are the people who believe in government. People are pissed at government for a reason. How do we make government deliver? See,
no, but the left don't believe in fucking government, you idiot. No. If we're talking dyed in the wool, actual fucking like communists and lefties, they do not believe in the state mechanisms and apparatus. They don't. Because, again, what is a prerequisite necessary for building a communist society? Whoa, the elimination of the state and the reappropriation of the means of production to the proletariat. Ezra does not agree with that as a liberal. So it's not the government that's going to be your fucking saving grace. No one worth their salt on the left actually fucking believes in that. Now, if we're talking about, like, I don't know, like social democrats, like maybe like a Sam Cedar, who is more like socially democratic, like more like a left sort of like, or like maybe even like a democratic socialist, he probably would not have like a problem with this, broadly speaking. But Ezra's a fucking neoliberal, all right? He's not like an actual fucking liberal. Let's keep it $1.50. No. The problem is, obviously, the fact that there's been like so far like zero mention about like the main problem being moneyed interests, especially in like so far this like whole fucking California rail question. It should be inherently fucking disqualifying, right? Because we know what was affected California rail. It was Elon Musk. Boy meets Minnie, you can attest to this. You live in California. You know what the problem is. You know.
See, and I think and I think in terms of results, I think you and I are largely aligned. But I think the problem is, and you bring up Doge, and it's ironic that you and Carney will approach it in a very similar way, but anticipate different outcomes. But that being aside, I mean, I think that is where people get a little bit
but I don't think we're approaching it similarly. I think it's at a level of abstraction, it's similar, and then you go granular and it's not at all.
But see, this is what we're talking about. See, like, it's their policy and politics are in the same place. So we have a level of abstraction, we have a level of granular, right?
I've driven LA, San Francisco many times and wish I could catch a train instead. Dude, like what? It's like what's the name of the main highway? It's like the 405 or something. That's like the complete shit show disaster highway or something, I think, right?
And the point is, the way that these two commingle, I think, becomes problematic, where these two things meet, because your identification of the primary problem, right? I mean, this is the point. Like, you don't address moneyed interest per se in the book. The primary problem is, I mean, if you just do a summary of the book, primary problem has to do more with the regulation and the handcuffing the state has done of itself. But the state doesn't do it itself. Like, all of this handcuffing comes from a place, and it's either moneyed interest or it's not. And I have no doubt that at different times.
This is where I think you really oversimplify politics. I want to try to find the right example because I think if we stay high,
Really oversimplify politics. That's so fucking funny, bro.
But let's talk about it from this perspective. We both believe in decarbonization, right? Climate change is a problem.
Yes.
And we sort of see the pathway on that is we have to build a lot of green energy to reorient our economy so you can run a modern economy on a green energy basis. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So
I mean, literally, Princeton disagrees with you. The main problem is this. Like, quite literally, it is influence over actual policy outcomes appear to be reserved for them almost exclusively for those amongst the top of the income distribution, dude. But yeah, sure, okay.
So to do that, you have to move all this energy production over renewable sources, and you have to get the energy from where it currently is, right? A solar farm, a wind farm, a hydroelectric, project, whatever it is, and run it through transmission lines to where we punch it into the wall and charge it.
Sure.
I've done a lot of coverage of this failure point because we are, to be perfectly clear about this, failing to build enough transmission lines. There is no world in which our decarbonization strategy works if we cannot increase by orders of magnitude how fast we are building transmission lines. There is money trying to build transmission lines. There is money trying to slow down the building of transmission lines. Just walking into this process and saying, where's the money, doesn't get you anywhere. Like, I have talked to the private equity figure.
Damn, so then maybe this should all be nationalized then, Ezra. Are you for nationalization of these resources then? Is Ezra in favor of nationalization, bringing this in line with the state? Seemingly he has to be, right? For this to make any sense whatsoever?
Figures trying to get a transmission line built. I've also talked to the green, New Dealers trying to get that same transmission line built, and I've also seen the people standing in the way, but who have all their reasonable and good arguments. I don't find when I dig into these things that the way I can just repeatedly sort politics is well, like over here there's the money and the money is bad, and over here there's the not money and the not money is good. Usually there's money on both sides of it. There are sometimes unions on both sides of it, and so the structure of the book, because I hope people come from this and want to read it. The structure of the book is typically working backwards from a problem. We're not building enough housing. If we go granular on that, what can we learn? We're not building enough transmission lines. If we go granular, what can we learn? And I just don't think abstracting out to money tied to state's hands. If money could untie the state's hands on a lot of big building projects, all these fucking developers would do it. But it can't because the proceduralism takes on a life of its own.
I follow what you're saying, that in each case there are specifics that are different, and you cannot generalize. It sounds like what you're saying.
You can generalize some, but you have to take seriously the specific issues in each case.
I have no doubt.
Your generalities should emerge out of the granularity.
Okay, what are the generalities? Like, this is what I'm asking.
I'm saying the default in America has become that building, particularly when the state is involved, has become too slow and expensive. We have created an architecture of policy that makes it too hard for us to achieve our goals in the real world, and for that matter in social insurance. Say again?
Who's the we?
It depends. You're not going to
We know who the fucking we is. It's building developers who want to make a profit from this, who aren't interested in the public good. They're people who are, broadly speaking, interested in profit. Profit is the fucking problem here. How was the Soviet Union able to fucking build crazy amounts of infrastructure projects? Same with the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, because they weren't motivated by the profit motive. Crazy.
Look, here's a version of the
Well, but I'm trying to address the point, because, for instance, okay, so, I don't want to
give you a better answer.
Well, but why I think this is important, though, is because, see, this to me is the central question, really, about because I think, like, I can say, there's some things in it I like, there's some things that I don't like, but the general point is, I think, for instance, where does the title abundance come from?
Derek's piece on abundance.
Okay.
Abundance.
We've seen an entire movement build up about abundance, correct? I mean, like, there is a lot of money behind this broad notion of abundance. And Derek, I think it was on the Lex Friedman podcast, said something to the effect of, there is a fight within the Democratic Party. I don't think he used the word for the soul of the Democratic Party, but for where we're going as a political movement. And folks from the Nicholson Center have said, like, we have identified the Democratic Party as the best place to have this abundance agenda. And so, as a political matter, they're not talking about, in that instance, in the Nicholson, they're not saying, like, in San Francisco, we need to roll back this specific policy. This is attempting to develop a movement.
Well, I want to answer for myself here, not for Ms. Cannon, right? So my first piece that
you were on that Lex Friedman podcast. I mean, that's
people should go listen to it. I stand by everything I said on the Lex Friedman podcast. But Derek, I believe, I'd have to go back and look at what section you're quoting from, but Derek is responding to a lot of very heated left criticism of the book, which, to be honest, neither of us were expecting. The way I wrote, at least my parts of the book, to me, are extremely compatible with virtually and frankly necessary for all left goals. The book about affordable housing, decarbonization, state capacity, and my initial piece that leads to this book is in, I believe, 2021, and it is building off of the fact that the Biden administration is trying to do decarbonization through building a lot, and as I begin to follow that policy project, I begin to realize that we're not going to get it done under these laws. So that's, I think, one very important thing. But I want to go back to what you asked a minute ago, which is who's we? In this book, we is Democrats. This book is very focused for a very particular reason we can talk about, because not that the only problems in governance come from the left. They don't. My first book was all about largely about the right and polarization and asymmetric polarization. But I became very interested in how you moved back to California in 2018. In why is a state governed by all these Democrats doing so badly? Why is it unaffordable? Why is it building less clean energy than Texas? Why is it not building?
Because Gavin Newsom doesn't want to seem too fucking progressive for his presidential run that he's probably going to do in 2028. That's why, Ezra. Because the problem is, like I said again, it's moneyed fucking interests that would do a lot of attack ads and advertisements, especially coming not only from the right, but even within sort of democratic fucking sources. Oh, it would be a bunch of people saying like, "Oh, look at how lefty fucking Gavin Newsom is in California and shit like that." That is why.
Building up housing. And part of the motivation for doing this book is there are a lot of problems Republicans, we're living through them right now. There are a lot of problems Republicans impose on the political system. But there's a sort of rigor and confrontation that I think is demanded when you look at the states where the people who, broadly speaking, agree with you are in power, and it's not working the way you want it to. You're not getting the outcomes you want to get. And so one story this book is telling is about a collision of the New Deal left, which is very, very focused on growth and building, and in many ways is very reckless with that. Right? You were talking about Worcester, Massachusetts, which sounds to me like it's a story from that era. But there, we can give Robert Moses is a classic story of this. We can talk about we really do despoil like environments and poison streams, and we run highways through marginalized communities and all the things people know. And in response to that, again, correctly, a new left arises. Ralph Nader, Rachel Carson, the entire environmental movement, and it passes all kinds of bills that are very, very, very effective and consequential in their day to restrain government's ability to act recklessly and to do things without considering and creating space for consideration of other impacts. So you have things like the National Environmental Policy Act and all these bills and projects of that era. And then in this fucking maddening historical moment we're in, the problem becomes not that we're building too much, but we're building too little. And particularly building too little in the places where that new left was most powerful, California, New York, places like that. And so this is a confrontation with having created a very successful architecture to challenge, restrain, and sue the government that is now being used against liberal or leftist for that matter projects. If you would like the government to do public housing, say you think I'm a neo-shit lib, and you just want the government to do the public housing, great. I would like to see a lot more public housing too. The government cannot currently do public housing under the regulatory structure under which it operates. And yes, some of that is money, but it's also the fact that you can sue to stop.
It's most of it is money, right? I do agree with Ezra here that a big problem with like HOAs and fucking NIMBYism is a huge, huge problem. He's not wrong when he says that, right? A big problem is that. Who put those fucking interests in place in particular? Real estate companies. People that have housing, that should want, like, have housing as a private commodity. Now, the question then becomes, okay, then Ezra, are you for the decommodification of housing? Is he for nationalization of housing, making it such that the state can do significant amount of subsidies within housing? And I have a feeling that that is probably not the case, because he certainly didn't make that argument within the quick blurbs that I've seen about the abundance agenda.
Stop all this stuff under the National Environmental Policy Act. It's also the fact that government, what I call everything bagel liberalism, loads huge amounts of standards and projects and goals into everything the public money touches. So in California, it costs about 2.2x per square foot to build housing as it does in Texas. Fine, market rate housing, 2x per square foot. If you are doing affordable housing subsidized by the government, it's more than 4x. So why are we making the government's housing for the poorest people so much harder, slower, and more costly to build? And like, is that in the long run good for our goals? I think it's important to confront why government in the place where people...
Because there's vested interests by the bourgeoisie to make sure that that is as expensive as possible, because they know they can't compete to the power of the state. That's why. Like, quite literally.
Agree with us more than the places where they don't is not getting the outcomes we both want to see it achieve. That's what the book is about.
And I don't know how much public housing is in Texas, or how much public housing is in Texas, or if we're, and that seems to me to be a relevant question. But the notion of the everything bagel liberalism, this is the idea that like we have constraints on federal money that a certain amount of union workers, or there may be a certain amount of equity associated with it. And at one point,
or contracting procurement, or a million other things, right?
And certainly, like there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we could go through these bills and find things that are problematic if they are coming necessarily from. There's two issues. One is there was one point in the book where you talked about we have a choice whether we're going to put filters into apartments that are built, public housing built near highways, or the people are going to live under the highway. And it seems to me that there's got to be a third choice. As opposed to we're going to poison people slowly, or we're going to keep them unhoused.
So I want to say specifically what you're talking about that section. So I'm talking to Jasmine Tong, who's an affordable housing developer, does nonprofit affordable housing. And what she's saying is that compared to market rate housing, when she is building housing for homeless people, she is subject to environmental green building standards, etc., that are so far beyond what market rate housing has to do that it often makes it impossible to finance the thing entirely. And a lot of these projects both fall apart. And I am saying there that it makes a lot of sense. You understand how people get into a conversation that we should have better than average air filtration systems in affordable housing built near a freeway, but in a city where you are not building enough affordable housing at all, because again you have layered not just that but a million of these onto every individual project. So again, it's costing much more per square foot than market rate housing.
Most public housing is built near the highway. Why is that?
Say again?
Most public housing, some huge percentage of public housing is built near highways.
We're not even talking, yes, that's all, I mean, listen, we're in agreement that that's all power. But when we are talking, I am saying that we are not building enough affordable housing.
I know, but I'm saying,
California.
why are we addressing that far downstream the issue when we're completely eliding the issue that is upstream from that?
We're not completely eliding the issue. The whole fucking book, man, is about wrecking these zoning codes that allow rich people to keep it out of their areas. Okay, if you can't build it in the first place because you can't make it affordable to build, which are the people who build.
Okay, so he's kind of like trying to speak out of both sides of his mouth here, basically, right? He is correctly identifying that a big portion of the problem is because of power, but he's not really talking about like the ways that can be fundamentally fucking addressed. That's kind of the problems here, right? I've constantly brought up what the sort of like main issues here are. All right, the main issues are obviously the fact that, hey, it is more difficult than ever to be able to afford a lot of these sort of projects and whatnot, because of the fact that, hey, there are a lot of vested interests that exist within the United States that make it such that this becomes way, way, way more difficult. That is the main crux of the problem here. But for some reason, Ezra doesn't really seem to talk about that. He wants to do like, he's being an enlightened centrist, basically, saying like, well, I mean, it's all because of the regulatory state that exists, but also it's because of because of moneyed interests. It's like, no, it's like, we're gonna do like unironic, like sort of zero sum gain here. It's purely the moneyed interests. It is moneyed interest that wants to make this as difficult as possible because they don't want to they don't want to compete against affordable housing because they know they would lose against that. That's the point.
Bill that will tell you, I think that I've actually found this whole set of arguments I've had is really productive in a way. I don't disagree with you about power, but every time we talk about it specifically, like, yeah, that's a problem. But no, we actually have to solve the problem. Like, if you want to make housing development by right, which I think you should do, so that rich communities can't stop it, and the affordable, I live on a block with public housing right now. I believe there should be public housing mixed in everywhere, but you can't build it if you cannot affordably build it. If you're gonna, in Chicago, the mayor of Chicago sent out this tweet and he said,
it's the richest country on the planet. It can be afforded. The affordability isn't the fucking problem here, because like again. He's trying to say, like, oh, it can't be affordable, but also, like, it's the fucking doublespeak. But he's also talking about, like, zoning laws. The primary problem is the fact that real estate developers don't see these as profitable, so they will do everything possible in order to stop these kinds of projects. That is the main fucking issue.
Said, hey, look at all we're doing. We built 10,000 units of affordable housing for $11 billion. People are like, you did fucking what? Like whatever it was, it came to $1.1 million per unit. If we're going to cost $1.1 million per unit when the government builds housing for poor people, we can't build enough of it. It doesn't matter where you're building it.
I mean, I think even if I stipulate that it is exclusively zoning requirements or the everything bagel liberalism that is creating the barrier to build housing. We can look at the CHIPS Act, and that was also something that had everything bagel liberalism built into it, which apparently, as far as I can tell, up until Donald Trump shows up, was quite effective. The timeline of things, definitely.
They went back and answered one of my critiques on the CHIPS Act. If you go back to that original piece, one of the things I'm saying is that they've loaded a lot in this bill but taken nothing away. After that piece comes out, President Joe Biden signs a bill from Ted Cruz and Mark Kelly exempting the CHIPS Act from environmental review under the theory, as the administration says, that we cannot allow this to be delayed for years and years under environmental review. So you can think that's bad or good, but if you want to say the CHIPS Act is going smoothly and well, it's in part because they took the critique.
Well, I think there are instances, and you talk about I-95, for instance, what Shapiro was able to do. The idea that, and my argument is, without that equity, you do get people living in apartments that are going to slowly kill them or give them asthma or higher asthma rates. Without that equity, you are going to destroy a neighborhood, and like we saw in Worcester, and like with generational impact. But I also think, as a political matter, it is extremely difficult, unless there is some type of buy-in from everybody, that there are circumstances that qualify as an emergency or an urgency that give you the political ability to do something like this. So, for instance, in the I-95 thing, you saw that as an example of where this type of like power, sort of centralized power to bypass this stuff, is effective, and it was very effective in that moment. But if you contemplate like the constituents and constituencies who would be for it versus against it, there may be people who are like, I got a store on Route 1, and if 95 that bridge is down, I'm going to make a lot of money because people are going to drive by. But outside of that, there was an alignment where in the fact that you could essentially bypass these things in a state of an emergency. There was the political will to do that. There was the political will to do that in the context of the CHIPS Act, and to revitalize industrialization. You had buy-in, and on some level, it feels like some of what you're talking about with the jettisoning of the everything bagel liberalism. Maybe it's like, it's not what you're talking about jettisoning is not the poppy seeds or the garlic or whatever it is on top, but it's like maybe the salt inside, or the dough.
Well, you have to be very connected to what you're trying to achieve. Like, I guess I would turn this question on you, because I feel like we want to be, as you were saying earlier, upstream. Do you think we can build enough affordable housing if the units cost $650,000 to $1 million to complete per unit? Just flat. Like, can we pay for that?
I would imagine not, depending on the locality.
So what should we do then? Like, what is your view of what is pushed? It doesn't cost that much to build market rate housing. So what is your view? If when you trigger government money, you often...
I'm trying to think in what world does it have to cost like millions of dollars in order to build affordable housing units? Like, why? Right? Is it mostly just like having land purchasing? Is that like the biggest reason why? That's like the only thing I can think of, right? But again, like, how is China able to do this? How are so many other countries able to do this for like relatively cheap? Like, what is like some of the places with the cheapest housing? Areas with the cheapest housing in the world. I'm talking about like what? Countries with like very, very affordable housing. Well, here's Hungary, New Zealand, Greece, the Slovakians, Australia, Germany. Very easy to apparently live in Germany. Probably in the cities it's more expensive, but if you're in like the more rural areas, probably not, right? Spain. Latvia has cheap housing. Switzerland. That is surprising. Chile. Croatia. The UK. Japan. Because they keep building a lot of housing, right? So with the Japanese, they build a ton of housing. I know that in like Tokyo and stuff, they have tons of housing. Slovenia, France, Norway, Lithuania. I feel like this is only global north countries. It's probably going to be mostly global. I mean, there was Chile. Chile was in the list. Bulgaria. Is Bulgaria like a global north country? Eh. Colombia. There's a country in the global south. Probably because of a lot of subsidization programs. Ireland. What the hell is this? Cheapest places to live in the world. Bali, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and number one is Colombia, as per this list. How are these countries able to do it, right? Because they have good social programs, and their state actually subsidizes these programs. That's why. But again, the richest country on the planet can't do it because of corporate fucking capture. That's the main fucking issue. We're gonna keep reiterating the same point over and over and over again. I'm gonna be like a fucking broken record at this point.
To double the per square foot cost in some cases of the housing it builds. Or when you trigger government money, they don't get things like high-speed rail done. Like, all I want to do here, man, I'm not here for like a big
Like here's the thing. I don't 100% disagree with a lot of stuff that Ezra Klein is saying here. What he's saying isn't exactly wrong. The main fucking problem is, however, what are the sort of main factors that are affecting this? Let's be quite honest here. It's corporate fucking capture of the state. That is the main common issue here. Sure, we can talk about like all the over-regulations. Those can certainly cause a problem. I don't really disagree with that. There's a lot of like over-regulations and shit that exists within the US. The biggest problem is corporations. Policy outcomes appear to be reserved almost exclusively for those at the top of the income distribution. Because let's be honest here. I do think that Ezra Klein is saying a lot of, and Derek Thompson are saying a lot of stupid shit. I do think so. The biggest fucking problem is not like over-regulations. Let's be honest here. If we're talking about market regulations, like you're saying, Boy Meets Mini, in terms of market regulations, those are very, very, like, threadbare within the U.S. If we're talking about, like, up to things that need to be up to snuff and building codes, in terms of, like, quality, those are regulations that should be high. The things that he's talking about that should be deregulated, right, are, like, stuff that makes, like, homes more green efficient, which are things that I agree with. The problem is the market. And Ezra does not talk about the market. That is the one commonality. That's the problem here. It's market forces in things that have inelastic demand. That is the issue.
Left, liberal, moderate fight. I actually want the government to deliver things I think we both want it to deliver. I don't want it to give people asthma, but I need it to be able to build housing because homelessness is a fucking problem, and it is the worst problem for the people experiencing it, not for me. So, what is your theory
I mean, look,
of how you get this cost of construction down to speed up? There's got to be something here.
Well, it's obviously localized, right? I mean, I have a sense of like in New York how it could be cheaper.
Okay, let's do New York.
We do not allow developers to sit on land and wait for the market to catch up to them. We do not allow homes to sit unoccupied without it being a cost on those people. I mean, there is a lot.
Yep, because again, what's a big problem? Speculative real estate fucking markets. Yeah, homeless people are a problem. I wonder what caused that, dog. Yeah, bad. The market is what fucking caused that. Crazy. Who would have thought that such a thing could be possible?
lot of excess housing and space in the city that is being held in private hands
Okay,
so
great.
that they can maximize their
Let's
profits.
say we do all that, but we're talking here very specifically.
Mhm.
New York City is going to have to build housing that is affordable. We know, like there are studies on this. You can read them. You can go talk to developers. Like the reporting on this is like very straightforward. We know that when you trigger the public rules, it ends up being extremely, extremely expensive. We know that, like in San Francisco, where they would try to build a public toilet for almost $2 million, they do that here too. Why does it cost?
So then you can tax the shit out of the wealthy of New York in order to be able to help to afford that. Again, these are already accounted for. But you seemingly have like a lack of understanding of what needs to be done. It's silly.
Cost so much, and why does it so often fail when government tries to achieve the things
Because
people want it to do?
I think property has been so commodified that there is such a profit incentive, such a money incentive to slow that roll. That it creates
Thank you,
a
Sam.
whole litany. There's an
We're
everything.
talking about
There's an
projects
everything
that are
bagel
we're talking about
of
projects that are past that point. Like I think that, let me be really meta clear here on what I'm trying to do with you, because I think you keep wanting to pull it back to where we can let's totally premise corporations are terrible, they are bad, they're they're your enemy.
They have their agenda and we have ours.
Yes, there are cases where the government is building affordable housing on land that they own or they've already bought or they're funding somebody else to build it that is already nonprofit housing. This is just like it's not being done for profit. We are not in a commodified system. We know that housing costs more than commodified housing costs to build. It is fine.
New York literally has a street called Billionaires Row where they live in fucking penthouses. Tax them. Couldn't have said it any better myself, Boy Meets Minnie. Whoa, it's almost as if there are incentives in place such that crazy your tax dollars work specifically for billionaires. We want to make affordable fucking housing, then quite literally, for the love of all that is good and holy, tax the shit out of the billionaire class. 19 families own 50% of the fucking wealth in America. That is a fucking problem.
Trying to say that it costs more. This is a totally reasonable interpretation. It is because wealthy landowners and wealthy corporations have colluded, maybe with other figures, on rules that made it cost more. But which of these are you going to pull apart, right? This is the trade-off that we're trying to force people to confront in abundance. You have to go into this thing and say, this is not working. I need to make it cheaper, faster, more achievable. Like when you can't make the corporation your villain, what are you doing? Like how do you approach?
Well, it's not a question of making the. Well, first off,
you tax the shit out, like you tax the fuck out of corporations and the billionaires. Guess what? You now have a bunch of extra money, so you can spend it on fucking housing. Crazy. And you don't have to fucking do super expensive housing. That's unnecessary. You don't have to do that. You don't. Quite literally, you don't have to fucking do that. Who said that the housing has to be fucking expensive? It's silly, dude.
I think as a political matter, making the corporations a villain is going to be far more. You're going to have a far broader support than making environmental groups or people seeking equity in housing the villain.
And that's fine, but
then I would say,
problem here.
well, and then I would say the problem again is that we have so greatly commodified housing. There is such a profit incentive to create these barriers. I know how they exist today. But the idea of unwinding it, you're just like, the whole book is about the idea that what was good intention 25 years ago, 40 years ago, has now brought us this problem. It seems to me that there's an attempt to restart that cycle.
I don't think that you can say, I really want to push you here. I don't think you can say the reason it costs more money and is so much more difficult and is so much slower to build non-profit affordable housing than build market rate housing is because we've over-commodified housing. I just don't, or that Texas is better at building housing because they.
Well, he just fucking admits it. He doesn't think it's all because of fucking over-commodification of housing. That is quite literally the main problem. In the examples that I've mentioned earlier, and this is quite literally a problem in even like Sam's example. I think Sam would, broadly speaking, agree with this. Who are the money interests that are in the ears of almost every single like fucking New York real estate developer? Oh, it's real estate fucking companies. Or of like every fucking mayor of New York. Real estate companies, the fucking developers as well, are constantly in their ears trying to get as many fucking sweetheart deals as possible to make, well, as much profit as possible within housing. For speculative real estate assets is one of the biggest fucking problems, as an example. That is the issue.
Decommodified housing compared to
Well,
California.
they have more space. They simply
Well,
have more
plenty of space. If you go to San Jose, man, there's plenty of space. It's strip malls and single-family homes. It is one of the richest tracts of land in the whole country, in the whole world. It could be skyscrapers. It could be Shenzhen. It is strip malls and single-family homes. We have plenty of space in California.
I mean, I can't speak to San Jose.
Like Silicon Valley is what I'm talking about. You go ride around where these fucking venture capital firms, man.
I don't disagree with this, by the way. Like, get rid of the fucking strip malls and stuff like that. Replace that with like Austrian-style fucking social housing. Yeah. And this is where Ezra Klein is fucking correct. But he's not talking about commodification. That is the common factor here. that is causing all these fucking problems. And that's the biggest issue that I have with the abundance agenda.
I promise you will not leave that drive saying there's nowhere to build a 6-story apartment building.
And do we have public transport there? Like, how
we
young
would
people
if we could build it. That was part of what high-speed rail is supposed to be doing, which is why I'm so rich.
And
if it
whose
didn't happen.
tax base is going to pay for that public transport in those buildings there? I mean, that's
It's our
the
tax
point.
base. I want the taxpayers.
I mean,
I am saying that I don't think it's plausible to say that the reason you can't build in like San Jose and you can in Texas is that we decommodified in Texas. We just haven't.
Well, we have plenty of space in the desert too. But the point is how are we going to? I'm talking about the places where you guys specifically make the point that New York City, San Francisco, these places are where people should be living and creating. And from my perspective in New York, having lived here more or less for 30 some odd years, 35 years, this place got a lot more expensive not because there were constraints on zoning. Not because there was equity. There hasn't been, this place got more expensive.
I'm pro-equity. I believe what I'm doing will create a whole lot more equity because you need to make affordable housing. But in the book, if you listen to it, I have a whole section critiquing Michael Bloomberg for this whole concept that New York City should be a luxury good. And
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is a whole section of the book that it is an incredible mistake that a lot of Democrats made along the way to sort of
no,
get into this
I
idea
mean,
that
I'm
cities are
not
like a penthouse for the upper class.
Yes.
But he doesn't want to say that the main problem isn't fucking over-commodification of housing. Okay, that's so fucking... It's very strange. He's like trying... Like I said before, seemingly what Ezra Klein is doing here is he's trying to fucking speak out of both sides of his mouth, mostly.
And I would suggest... I mean, look, there was this just came out. A report by the Fed, UCLA, that specifically addressed the question of whether it was housing constraints. California Federal Reserve researchers found that constrained housing supply is relatively unimportant to explain the differences in rising house prices among U.S. cities.
Have you read the debate on this report?
I haven't. But it said higher income growth predicts the same... Okay, well, it's controversial. I mean, I'm willing to accept that. Like I said,
on some basic level, right? If you have enough, things follow supply and demand. If you have enough of something, if you have too much of something, the price of it is going to fall, right? To argue that higher incomes, because, and this again, I think in a weird way we would agree on this, higher incomes are going to be a causal factor in restrictive zoning and building policies. Because people get higher incomes, they buy a house, that house becomes a major asset for them. And again, this is all in the book. The way they can protect the value of that asset is by making it impossible for other people to live in near them. They are creating their own scarcity. And so again, when I hear this book is not about power, to me this book is all about power.
Well, but I still can't get an answer as to what is the primary... If we were talking from a national perspective, right? I mean, across the country, this is going to be a message. You just visited the Senate caucus to talk about this. Derek was talking about there's a fight that's happening right now. Our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party. I mean, if this fight's going on, and this is part of a movement, there's a lot of money behind it. I can't remember the organization, you probably know, just dropped $120 million citing the abundance movement. There's a lot of money behind this. What is the... I know that there are granular problems in each of these different cities, but do you think if there is a villain, and I imagine that there's, a good movement always needs a villain, what is the villain? Is it just we have overly restrictive zoning and...
I think you and I probably disagree that good movements are built on clear villains, but let me try to give you a good answer to this question. We didn't think the intra-left argument was with you. Just to be really blunt about it. I thought, the neo-Brandeisians, etc.
I don't know if I'm necessarily neo-Brandeisian, but okay.
You may not be, but they've been very critical of it. We thought the intra-left argument had to do much more with a debate that is very live. Again, it's a sort of New Deal, New Left divide to us between is the right future organizing government to organize the resources of society to create this kind of plenitude of housing, of energy, of infrastructure, these things that we want, of innovation, which is a big part of the book? Or is it more of a small is beautiful future? Is it more degrowth inflected? Is it more that we actually build too much already? Is it that there isn't enough meaning in things? In a weird way, Donald Trump has begun to really embody this other side when he comes down and he says, maybe the kids have too many dolls, right? You got 30 dolls, maybe you only need 2. You got 30 pencils, maybe you only need 5. So our view was not that the sort of fight that was live here was with people who worry about corporate power. It's that if you come from the places I come from, frankly, that you live in now and I live in now, you see a lot of Democrats who show up at the planning meeting and don't want any affordable housing because they don't want it to change their housing values. Yeah. You see a lot of people using all sorts of tools of delay in all sorts of directions to stop things from happening. And to us, I think one of the really profound fights is, do you think delay as a omnipresent tool of governance is a virtue, or do you think speed is more of a virtue? And if you think speed is a virtue, as I do, I think we should deliver government services much faster. Then what sort of moves are you willing to make that true?
I'm confused. You were surprised that your fight fight was with the neo-Brandeisians. Who did you think? Did you think the fight was like you talked?
There's a big schism in the environmental movement and the environmental community between the side that thinks we need to build our way towards decarbonization and the side that is much more about worrying that when we build things, we're going to change environments. We're using things like California Environmental Quality Act and National Environmental Policy Act to stop things that might.
What would their movement? I'm trying to figure out who you're talking about. Like degrowthers?
Yeah, I was about to say, is this like degrowth shit or something? This is weird.
If you follow or report on any part of the decarbonization fight, you will find that the entire architecture of environmental policy we have is being mobilized against it in order to sue it out of existence, sometimes by moneyed interests. But there was a point in time when a chapter of the Sunrise Movement, I think it was in Mass, signed on to a solar moratorium. There is a lot of conflict among people who see themselves as liberals committed to these goals, etc., on whether building is good or bad. I think that if you're looking very skeptically, but what do you think NIMBYs are?
Well, I think NIMBYs, for the most part, are wealthy people.
Right, that's a big part of the fight we thought we were about to have.
the Kennedys, yes. Stop the windmills.
So now you're making my argument for me. Come on, do it. Give it to me.
No. But when I look at the common strain through those people and their ability to actually impact policy, I see money.
Okay, but you look at one strain and I probably have a broader set. So let me give you one where we'll disagree.
Wait, but what is broader than that?
Yeah, like what else could it be besides capital? Like quite literally, it's all capital, broadly speaking, because moneyed interests they're all gonna be fucking NIMBYs. Like, who are like? Does Ezra Klein think that like there's like people who are poor that are NIMBYs? Is that the argument here? Sure, I guess technically speaking, you could say that some people who are poor are also NIMBYs. But generally speaking, the main people who are NIMBYs who have power are developers, real estate companies. It's those people.
Because it's not just the Kennedys. It's not just the people.
No, I know it's not just the Kennedys, but I'm talking wherever those NIMBYs succeed. I'm willing to bet that the relationship between how much money they have and the YIMBYs have, the NIMBYs far more often than not will have more money. I mean, this is like, I know you know the research on this. Like when these are contested, there's no doubt in my mind that
we love NIMBYs,
we have regulations
folks.
but it's to protect people's assets and people who have assets versus people who don't have assets. And so like that is the. I don't know how you generalize it more than that.
So I think on this, on the NIMBY side, we largely agree, right? And so when I say that we thought there were different obvious sources of opposition, that was a big one. And we would, I mean, again, as you know, there's a whole section of the book about how destructive it has been to turn housing into the central asset class and wealth engine for the middle to upper middle class, right? It's not true for the very wealthy, but that's a thing people know. But here's a place where we probably disagree. In California, where I'm more familiar with politics, the California Environmental Quality Act, which I think most people agree has overgrown its initial design and is being used to do things like try to stop UC Berkeley from expanding dormitoriums because more students are environmental nuisance. One thing that really defends it is that there's a coalition of unions that use CEQA to sue development in order to get unrelated labor standards concessions. And to me, that is a misuse of power. I am pro stronger labor standards. I am not pro radically expanding how much you can delay every single project in order to get concessions that were not in the initial architecture or vision of that bill. So yes, there's power. The NIMBYs are power. The NIMBYs are related to money, but power is also misused by groups I feel more allied with. And that's one utility of focusing on blue states for me.
We had a union problem in the context of Medicare for all in that fight. I mean, there's I think you can find that all across a ton of different issues, and you have unions on different sides of the same issue because they're
trades are very different in California.
But I think we both agree that the net value of a strong union movement is a positive, and actually like a lot of problems we have in terms of across the board are a function of the deunionization of the country. So there's no doubt like we can find specific instances, and I sort of feel like that's
yeah, because if we're talking about vestiges of power that a lot of people can kind of that if we're talking about like people with vestiges of power in terms of like not people who like own stuff, but like people who are able to advocate for their positions, like you need strong unions. You need people to be able to advocate for their own positions, and that just broadly speaking doesn't really exist anymore in the U.S. because of just how decrepit and destroyed unions have become. Ezra's making this so much more confusing than it has to be. Yeah, a lot of the because let's be honest here. He is saying things that are broadly speaking agreeable. The thing is that he does like a lot of like fucking doublespeak, saying like, well, it can be capital, but it's also power, but sometimes it's not this, but sometimes it's also this, but sometimes it's that, but sometimes it can also be this. And it's just like, okay, if we're talking about politics and advocating for positions, you have to make it a very, very clear message. This is the same problem that that BLM had with defund the police. A very easy, catchy slogan, obviously, but one that can be easily misappropriated and misused in every single way by conservatives, mostly. Even some liberals, to be honest. If we're talking about, say, like, a lot of the, like, other failed movements in terms of, like, unions that have been, like, bombed by, like, a federal sort of that have been like destroyed by federal movements. You can also talk about like potential criticisms there as well, but that's like more arguable, I guess. We can like nitpick about like certain movements. I'm not expecting like advocates and activists to get anything really perfect at all. Most of the people are typically impassioned, very, very like impassioned people who are going to advocate for things that are good, and sometimes they advocate for things that are bad, right? No one is fucking perfect, obviously. I think we can, broadly speaking, make that kind of agreement. But to completely not have the focus utterly on the fact that moneyed interests are like the main sort of vestiges and things that are doing the causing the problems in terms of, the effective sort of apparatus of the state of the United States. Say that like 5 times fast. Is ludicrous. Everyone, broadly speaking, like there's been studies on this. in terms of like who holds the real power in terms of policy outcomes. It's the oligarchs, it's the billionaires. Like, with a lot of fucking examples. Boy Meets Mint, I have a question for you. You know, our resident, like, sort of California, viewer. Have there been, like, a bunch of housing initiatives that have been shut down by billionaires? Is that a thing that has happened before? Like, different, like, propositions? Yup. Who would have thought that was a problem that was caused? Whoa. Like what? Do you know of any particular examples off the top of your head? Anything? Anything at all? Rick Caruso. So that's specifically, I believe that would pertain specifically to LA, right? He's a multi-billionaire real estate mogul. So that would specifically pertain to Los Angeles, which makes sense that you're referencing Los Angeles because, you know, that is what you are most familiar with. You live there, obviously. So, again, if we, like, want to completely ignore the sort of, like, things that billionaires have done, I think that is just an extremely sort of reckless thing to do. Because they are the ones who, like, I'm okay, I'm not going to say completely ignore. I don't think Ezra's completely ignoring them, but not sort of like focus on them being the sort of main problem. Because think of it this way, and this is something that Ezra Klein does not consider. Why is there a lot of complicated regulation that also exists? Right? You have to think about this for just a couple seconds, okay? Think about this. Why is there sometimes just a lot of complicated regulation that can exist within the United States? A lot of that is purposefully done by lobbyists to make other certain affordable sort of policies way more difficult to achieve. For what exactly? The profit motive. A lot of companies and corporations will lobby for bills and positions to make it a lot harder and to obfuscate and talk about certain issues to obfuscate real solutions to actual fucking problems. This happens all the fucking time. Because again, if you distract other people with other sort of talking points, they won't be able to notice the oligarchs running out of the back door with the money in their hands.
Part of what I have as a critique of the book, there are particular instances. But broadly speaking, when we're talking about coalitional politics, which is definitionally democratic politics, to move forward and to have power and to actually get things done, it seems to me you can't do it by diminishing the coalition.
So there we genuinely disagree.
Yes.
Like that is truly, like, I always want to be very honest about points of disagreement. There are places where I think we're actually aligned, and here I think Democrats become way over coalitional, and I think it is a huge problem that we are not delivering.
Which parts of the coalition do you think should be jettisoned?
I don't ever talk about in terms of jettisoning, because I don't think that's how coalitions work. I think they just change issue to issue. But I do not think we should have such a level of proceduralism that forces this many giveaways to this many interests in every process. And again, to use an example where I think we would probably be
Can
more
you be specific about the interests? Are there interests?
God, that's so non-fucking specific. Like what? Like what? Like what exactly? Because I can agree with that, but like what? Like, should the Democratic Party decouple themselves from, like, fucking billionaires and stuff? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yes. I agree with that. Should every single Democratic politician now refuse billionaire money? Yes. But the problem is that he's being very non-specific with a lot of the stuff that he's saying. Why is that?
That go across the board. I mean, that's what I keep trying to get at. Is that like everything is specific?
You keep trying. I think my virtue is specificity, and your critique of me is I'm overly specific. Mine of you is overly general.
I'm saying like you're specific about the granular instances, but you say we need to have less interest. And I want to know who those interests are that we need to have less of.
I want to have. Let me go back to the Medicare example for a minute because you brought that up and I think it's a good one. We passed Medicare, sent out those cards in a year. When the Biden administration did two things I think we both probably liked, which is prescription drug negotiations and limiting out-of-pocket lifetime caps, or having lifetime caps for out-of-pocket costs. It took them 3 or 4 years to move through a regulatory process that we have expanded with things like notice and comment periods and more opportunities for judicial review that can be utilized by, in this case, pharmaceutical companies, but others as well, to kind of slow everything down and force a lot of concession. I want to break that process and make it much more under agency discretion, what they do, and make it harder to challenge. In that case, that's going to hurt pharmaceutical companies, right? So I think that you and I would like it. In the California housing case, I want to make housing construction much closer to by right, right? I want you to have the right to build the housing you want to build, assuming it conforms to basic standards. This is what we've done in California for ADUs. It worked really, really well. A lot of people will be mad about that. NIMBYs, sort of unions, etc. I would like to make it easier to build modular housing. Again, different people will be mad at that. I don't have one answer for you on who I'm trying to screw over because I'm not trying to screw anybody over. What I'm trying to do is focus liberal governance on the outcomes it is promising people and get people to confront why we are failing to deliver them. If you end up with a different answer than me, that's great. But that should be a very granular confrontation with why high-speed rail didn't happen, why the Second Avenue subway is so fucking expensive, why we're not building enough housing. I don't believe you can do this in generalities in the way that I think a lot of people want to. I think that it requires a lot of confrontation with the individual failures we see and then trying to figure out, okay, do things rhyme across these failures? Is there a level of government should have the authority that currently does it. That kind of thing.
All right, I've held you really long, and so I want to, but let me just, so what is then the political, like, what do we organize around as a political movement? If it is in these various instances, people are going to get
That's something a
situationally
little specific there.
marginalized in the process, right? I mean, or however gently you want to say, your interests here, we're going to ignore in these specific cases. What is the political message that's going to resonate and get these different factions of the Democratic Party on board with this as a broad message?
I think every national politician who succeeds tends to be reformist and highly critical of the era of their party that came right before them. Bill Clinton was very critical of the Democratic Party preceding him, sort of New Democrat, etc. Barack Obama was extremely critical of both the way money acted in politics prior to him. You might disagree about his actual administration, but and then the Iraq War. Donald Trump was extremely critical of the pre-Donald.
I mean, but the problem is that all these guys are fucking liars. They're charlatans because they're fucking politicians first and foremost. And politicians love to lie about fucking everything.
Trump Republican Party. I think being honest with people, that you have noticed the same failures on your side that they have, is a very potent politics. Now, I am not a politician. I don't have to win elections. I have a freedom to say things that I think are true, that maybe Pete Buttigieg and Westmore and Gretchen Whitmer and whoever don't. So I don't necessarily come here telling you I know how to win elections. I don't think you should believe me or really anybody else who doesn't routinely win elections if they tell you that. But the idea that pointing out, yeah, we fucked up. Yeah, things are moving too slow. Yeah, you don't feel the government is spending your money well. I thought it was incredibly telling that when the New York Times polled this just a couple weeks ago, what you found when you polled people, like, is government inefficient? Plus 18. Is Doge a good idea? Plus 6. Is Doge doing a good job? Minus some significant number. Is Elon Musk doing a good job? Like minus 18 or 20. People believe, often correctly, that government doesn't deliver for them, that it's not spending their money well, that they're not getting what they want out of it. And I think going to them in the first order and saying, yeah, I'm going to be relentlessly focused on making sure the roads I promised to fix for you actually get fucking fixed this time. We are actually going to build. We learned something about California high-speed rail, and the next time we do one of these big projects, here's what we learned, and here's how we're going to make it work. Look, I could be wrong. I think it's
Which
a
of
politics.
those of the 3 Democratic presidencies that we've lived under would you rate the highest in terms of your policy set in terms of accomplishing?
Obama, but there's things you need to learn from that one too.
And that's a function of the ACA?
Function of the ACA, I mean, I think they got a lot done that was very valuable, but I will always say that part of my thinking goes back to that era, because you go back to the 2009 stimulus bill, and what does it promise? Where it's big headline projects that are going to be the reinvestment side. It's high-speed rail, it's a national set of interoperable health records, and it's a national smart grid, and we are over 3.
I would also argue they screwed up on the housing crisis.
Yeah, but the problem is like, I mean, Sam is immediately going to get into it. It's, yeah, they fucked up on the housing crisis because, again, like, who did fucking Obama primarily bail out? It was not homeowners. It was the banks. That's the biggest problem. Banks were the main people who got fucking bailed out.
Immensely, and under Obama we lost 1,000 statewide Democrats, which is why I think we had such a poor bench over the following 10 years. Some comptroller loses their job because of the wave. I'm not convinced that we didn't get Trump as a function of Obama.
I think a full debate between us on Obama should
that would be a different day. But Ezra, I really appreciate you taking the time, and we will link to Abundance and of course your podcast, huge podcast, and the New York Times is also a well-known newspaper.
I've heard of it, yeah, a strong Northeast.
All right, I think we're done with this. Lovely, very good. So, I suppose a conclusion is sort of in order. Broadly speaking, there is stuff that is there that is agreeable. The issue is that, like, it's going to be very difficult to sort of sell this to the American people because it's not very simple and he's not being very, very specific. Is my main sort of criticisms that I have here with Ezra Klein. Seemingly, a lot of this very fucking waffly. I'm gonna be quite honest here. Very, very waffly. Yeah, like, be more specific, lefties. Like, be more specific about, like, this and that and the other. Like, that's, like, the sort of, like, main issue we can probably sort of, like, speak to here. Be more specific, but he himself is also not very specific about a lot of the stuff that he's talking about as well. So it's just like, okay, so then, like, which is it? Like, what's going on here? Be specific, but I'm not being specific. But you're not being specific, but I'm not being specific. It's just like, okay, like, what are we talking about here, right? And that becomes the main problem. That becomes the main issue. So, I do broadly speak, I agree that one of the main problems with the Democratic Party is obviously a lot of them, generally speaking, they don't really seem to give much of a shit at all about, like, seemingly providing for the good of, like, the people, I guess, for, like, lack of a better term. And that a lot of them really don't seem to care all that much about for the sort of, like, the well-being and bringing about the sort of the ideal sort of outcomes necessary to bring about efficacious sort of positions, I guess, for lack of a better term, that can help provide for the most amount of people possible. Let's be quite honest here. The problem is like, if you try to make this pitch to like your average person, and you're being very non-specific, that typically doesn't really work out all that well. Like, people will just get kind of confused about it, which is like, it's an unfortunate thing to sort of say, but like, hey, you know, like, people don't specifically have a lot of time to get into like the sort of like nuances of policy really all that much. Let's be quite honest here. Not really. A lot of people have to there's an affordability crisis that is, broadly speaking, sort of occurring, and it's more and more difficult than ever for most people to be able to, like, I don't know how to plan a city, when in reality for a lot of people it's just like, man, I'm just like trying to survive out here. Yeah, like you're saying, Boy Meets Mini, like, people aren't city planners. They want city planners to do their job. And the issue is that it's very difficult for city planners to do their job because of the fact that there's a lot of corporate capture that exists, broadly speaking, through both fucking parties. And the fact that that's not the sort of like one of the main focuses within any of Ezra Klein's critiques, he does say it is a factor, but that it's not the main sort of factor, is, I don't know if it's correct for me to say that it is telling, because I don't think it's really telling. I don't think so. I would say it's more so like kind of like interesting that those aren't the main things that he wants to sort of like focus on, because we know, like, with like all the like municipal policy that gets like covered, broadly speaking, a lot of like housing doesn't get, generally speaking, built very often by sort of real estate developers and like NIMBYs, as a result of fucking, or like, you know, NIMBYs advocating that they don't want these affordable housing units to be built, because of the fact that America fundamentally does housing wrong. They have housing as a asset that is meant to act as a vestige of fucking wealth, when that's not what housing is there for. The problem is with what Sam was saying. That is a byproduct of over-commodification of housing and the over-commodification of everything. Capitalist fucking realism, as Mark Fisher described. One factor no one talks about but is huge: corporate office workers are ingrained with pro-corporate POV on city and state policy. For example, Uber and Lyft encourage devs to support their anti-union BS. Yeah, with like Prop 21. That's a really good point there, Boy Meets Mini. A lot of corporations very often will go forward and push out a lot of beneficial sort of state policy that is meant to, primarily speaking, benefit them. And many people who live and work in cities are corporate office workers. Whoa, crazy. You're telling me that the people who fundamentally have a lot of control in these hierarchies make it such that they do everything possible in order to help maintain that hierarchy? Say it ain't so. Crazy, right? And that's like the main fucking problem. Yeah, ain't no fucking way. It's all about, what is it in the end for a lot of the bourgeoisie and the billionaires? Maintenance of hierarchy and control. The same thing that I have been constantly reiterating over and over and over again. And for some reason, Ezra Klein doesn't... Maybe he does sort of engage with this sort of position, but he's not really being very specific about it. Mostly wanting to blame a lot of the state. And I do agree with him that there are a lot of like over-regulations within the state, but generally speaking, he doesn't really talk about... He only talks about the over-regulation of the state, but not a lot about the under-regulation of the markets, of corporations, of wealthy people. Those are the main sort of people that you need to focus on if we're talking about producing efficacious outcomes for, you know, sort of like... I don't know if it's correct to say like YIMBY policy, or like a better like economic policy in general. But if we're purely sort of talking about like, hey, producing outcomes that are efficacious for a lot of different people, you need to talk about you quite literally, you have to fucking talk about the effects that corporations have on the effects that corporations have on a lot of different policy proposals, and the fact that markets are as crazy fucking deregulated as they are. You have to mention that, like, without like a shadow of a fucking doubt. But yeah, what's the reasonings for as to why they do this quite often? Again, like I said before, maintenance of hierarchy and control, because for these billionaires, that is what it's all about in the end. First and foremost, of first order fucking principles, maintenance and hierarchy of control. So if we want to talk about, like, yo yimbyism and stuff like that, that's all fine and dandy and everything. I agree with that, obviously. But if you want to, if you can't do that without just like ignoring the sort of like, I don't know if like plight is correct to say per se, but like you can't sort of ignore the sort of control that a lot of these corporations have at all, because they are the main reasons for as to why all this bullshit is constantly fucking happening, right? Maintenance and hierarchy of control, a first order principle for conservatives. Never forget that. Oh, and yeah, exactly like you're also saying, Boy Meets Mini. The problem with YIMBY is it maintains the landlord's power. Exactly correct. If we want to sort of like deconstruct the sort of necessary vestiges of fucking control, broadly speaking, there has to be a look at the sort of a reassessment of the current hierarchies and systems that exist that allow for these things to exist. But yes, it's all in service of property value and stuff like that, and not equity. And that's probably like the sort of main problem. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend and say that like there wasn't good points that were raised by Ezra Klein. There was good points that are put there. The problem is that like if we're not, if you have to focus on these sort of effects and byproducts that a lot of sort of like corporate policy has in terms of this stuff. You have to, like, you can't just ignore any of that stuff. It has to be paid attention to and looked at and criticized with a fine-tooth comb, broadly speaking. So obviously plenty to criticize there. There's stuff that can be certainly agreeable, but broadly speaking, overall, I think there's also quite a few things that are certainly worth criticizing if we're talking about the sort of abundance agenda. I would broadly say, as like a sort of like overall conclusion, it's not challenging the fundamental systems of power and control that have gotten us to the sort of positions that we have gone to. There are some critiques there, but it doesn't quite go all the way, is what I would basically say. And that's broadly speaking. I think that's really all I have to say about that, I think.